Hello, everyone, and welcome to you wherever you are in the world. I'm extremely excited today to be hosting a webinar with our wonderful guests from Turtle Island in a beautiful part of what is now called the USA. So in just a minute, I will introduce our wonderful speakers. But first, I'd like to share some slides, acknowledge country, introduce our organisation, and introduce myself. So for those who don't know me, my name is Michelle Maloney. I'm the co-founder and national convener of a little not-for-profit organisation called the Australian Earth Laws Alliance, or AELA, as we like to call her. And I'll share some slides so that I can tell you a little bit about the bioregioning webinar series that we've been hosting, a little bit of an overview of the work we do, but not much, because I can't wait to get to all of our wonderful speakers. So just let me open up the slides. Fantastic. So as I said, we are delighted to have Bill, Brenda, Maggie and Mike joining us from Turtle Island today. And they're going to be telling us stories from the Mystic River, their beautiful part of the world. So first, I'd like to acknowledge country for those who might not be from Australia, for people like myself who are descendants of non-Indigenous people who came to this country as part of the colonisation and part of the British Empire and imperialism. We personally feel a huge debt to acknowledge that the first peoples of this continent that is now known as Australia is continuing to be the lands and the laws of the first peoples of Australia. I'd like to acknowledge that I personally live up in the beautiful lands of the Cubby Cubby peoples. And when I go up the hill behind my house and look out over this kind of view, the Glasshouse Mountains is the English name, I'm also looking out across Jinnabara country. So I feel really privileged to live in such a beautiful part of the world. Australians know this map well. It's a map created by Westerners, but from elder friends like Mary Graham who say that it's a good map because it shows people the governance systems and the language map of the first peoples that continues today. I live sort of around this little part of the world. And again, I'd like to acknowledge the first peoples. Land was never ceded, always was, and it always will be Aboriginal land. And I'd also like to acknowledge Indigenous and other First Peoples on the call today. So here in the Australian Earth Laws Alliance, our inspiration comes from two big branches of work. One is the Western critique of the systems that the industrialised economies and industrialised cultures have brought, particularly work like that of Thomas Berry in a book called The Great Work, where he critiques the underpinning structures of industrialised society and says that because they are all human-centred and because they are focused on extractivism, we have brought ourselves to a place of crisis. And so Earth jurisprudence is a theory or an idea that informs a lot of our work. But I also, to me, the big question of life is how to be a good human being, a good earthling in our place, on our planet, in our local places. Being a local person living in Australia, to me, one of the greatest joys has been learning more and more about First Nations people's culture, law and governance, which has cared for country since time immemorial. Western science keeps telling us it's about 50 or 60,000 years, but I'm sure that will get pushed back. So I just want people to know that here inside the Australian Earth Laws Alliance, we're fascinated by and devoted to the idea of how we can shift the current destructive practices of modern societies towards an earth-centred way of being, caring, thinking, feeling, and the deep inspiration that other cultures can provide to the systems that are causing the harm today. I do just want to mention in AELA, we talk about governance a lot, and I won't be boring about the governance stuff, but I am a governance nerd. When we talk in AELA about shifting our governance systems from human-centred to earth-centred, what do we mean? And I think this is a really handy thing to remember, is that the issues that cut across all of humanity's activities are how we organise ourselves, how we actually make decisions, how we use resources. The way that human beings interact with the living world is obviously one of the great causes of the harm we see today. So here at AELA, when we talk about governance, we're not talking about corporate governance or government governance. We're talking about the whole kit and caboodle, the rules we make to live, work and play together at every scale of human activity. And the reason that's interesting to us is that through systems change across law and economics and education, supporting different kinds of social norms and behaviours, we can really make a shift to the harm that we're causing today. And of course, underneath humanity's actions are our deep cultural worldviews, the values and beliefs, and the things that we hold as important. So this is the core of what AELA is interested in. And if you know anything about our work, because we're multidisciplinary and we work across lots of different sectors and places, people can often try to work out what we're up to. This is what we're interested in, how we shift our whole culture back to something where humanity is in more harmony with the living world. So to our bioregional governance series, for about 8 years, we've been experimenting with a project we call Greenprints, and I can tell you more about that on another day, or you can look up another webinar. But for us, if our call is to shift the industrialized world to be more caring and loving for nature, one of the calls for that is to become better custodians and stewards and more connected to local place. And again, for people from First Nations culture, this can often sound weird because that is the depth of their culture. But for Westerners, that separation has become quite pathological in our institutional systems. So we see bioregioning, which is effectively an English word and a Western construct, but bioregioning is like a bridge concept, particularly for industrialized societies, to be thinking differently about how we guide our lives by what Mother Nature is telling us is a good thing to do. So it's a concept that sees human societies and culture as part of nature and proposes that our societies can be more sustainable, successful, and meaningful if we're all connected more deeply and more practically to how the world really works. I also want to honour 2 people who are deeply important to my life, because all of the work in the last 15 years that I've been doing has been heavily informed by a lot of my Indigenous friends. And I don't want to upset anyone, but I just want to acknowledge that one of my best friends in the whole wide world, Ross Williams, passed away a couple of weeks ago. And he and my other dear friend, Mary Graham, are in serious grief mode, but we really want to acknowledge that his guidance and support and love has really helped us in our work, me particularly. So I want to not acknowledge Future Dreaming, the organisation we built together, the passing of Ross, but the absolute honouring of his work, which will continue. And we're going to host some memorial activities and guest lectures for Ross in the proper time. I'm not going to talk too much about this. What I would like to point out in a minute is there's a wonderful guest lecture by Mary Graham about the place-based sacralised stewardship system that she describes of the First Nations folks of Australia, and how deeply powerful that is to the work we do in AELA. And one of the additional reasons why I'm so excited today to hear from our friends at Turtle Island and their perspectives and their connections. To me, these connections are the most beautiful things that human beings can celebrate and enjoy. So I'm really looking forward to that. We'll be able to tell you more about Greenprints another day. This is a quick plug for watch the recordings from some of our bioregional talks already. Wonderful Mary Graham. We've had Ian Lowe, lots of wonderful human beings, and anyone who wants to talk about bioregioning in Australia or around the world, we're super keen to chat with you. We had folks from the UK, fantastic session. But now, enough from me. I'm so glad I had time to share with you what's important for AELA and why we're running our bioregioning series. And now it gives me great delight to introduce our guest speakers. I won't read all the words. I hope that folks have read their little bios and connected to their work when registering for the event. But let me introduce our 4 wonderful speakers. So welcome to Bill. Bill is known internationally for his work as a systems transformation catalyst and an advocate for bioregioning through his wonderful organisation R3.0, which I think I still occasionally say the name wrong, but Bill will clarify how he just refers to his redesign for resilience and regeneration. And Bill is also connected to everybody else who's connected to the Mystic River. And Maggie, welcome Maggie. Maggie is the co-founder and lead director of the Alliance for the Mystic River Watershed. And she's an author, regenerative co-designer, educator, and community-led climate change specialist. And a special welcome also to Brenda. Brenda is the vice chairman for the Eastern, I would say an Australian, and forgive me if this sounds wrong, Pequot tribal nation, and a collaboration coordinator for the Alliance for the Mystic River Watershed. And finally, but not last, Mike Thomas He's a director of the Mashantucket and again Pequot. Please, I should have asked. I do hope I haven't caused offence. Museum and Research Centre, and I can't wait to hear your talks and also your correct pronunciation of these beautiful names. So without further ado, what we're going to have is I'll ask Bill to have a little chat first, and then I think we're going to turn to maybe Maggie's going to show some slides, and then everyone's going to be sharing their stories about place. And cannot wait to hear what you're up to. So welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining us. Bill, would you like to kick off, perhaps? You're on mute, Bill, if you didn't know already.
Thank you. Just pulling the slides up. Thank you, Michelle, for such a gracious introduction. And I'm really excited to be in this session today. It's kind of a reciprocity for you appearing on our series of open dialogues on bioregioning last week. So it's really wonderful to connect more deeply with your community. And I will kick things off talking sort of more from a global perspective and about backgrounding bioregioning, and then really kind of hone in for the handoff to Maggie, Brenda, and Mike with the Alliance for the Mystic River Watershed to tell those more specific stories about that region. But I'm calling what I'm talking about stewarding bioregional coherence. I will start with one of my favorite slides to discuss the idea of bioregioning, which to use the term that Peter Berg, one of the originators of the sort of most recent wave of bioregioning going back about a half century, he calls it the relationship or the merging of a geographic terrain with a terrain of consciousness. And a couple of years ago, I stumbled upon this research that was being conducted in British Columbia. Researchers were looking at these 3 subspecies of bear, and they had very delineated habitats, but the researchers couldn't figure out why. They were scratching their heads until they overlaid these habitats with the indigenous languages of that area, and they found near perfect alignment. And I think that for me really encapsulates the idea of bioregioning, that there is this co-creation, if you will, between the natural world, and of course, human beings are part of the natural world, but the culture that we develop being intimately related, and that they have mutual impact on each other. The other thing that I often present when talking about bioregioning is the millennial scale history of this, in particular referring to the work of Lila June Johnston, who has spoken in some of our events. And this is her dissertation called Architects of Abundance, Indigenous Regenerative Food and Land Management Systems and the Excavation of Human History. And this slide in particular is a graphic where she talks about indigenous pyrogenic landscape management. In other words, burning of lands in order to regenerate the fertility of those lands and feed the plants and animals in a regenerative cycle with the human communities there. So this was done on a bioregional basis or a landscape basis at a large scale. And so Lila June contends that bioregioning is, has a millennial year history. So just, founding our thinking in bioregioning briefly there. Now I'm going to go a little bit more local before scoping out again. In 2019, I, through my work with R3.0, decided to really jump both feet into bioregioning. And so I co-founded the Connecticut River Valley Bioregioning Collaborative. And Michelle asked for maps. She's like, maps and pictures of animals. So here I'm clicking off one of those check boxes with, this is actually the eco region based on Environmental Protection Agency maps of the Connecticut River Valley eco region. And so that map kind of delineated that early work in our neck of the woods, so to speak. Now I want to scope back out to the work that R3.0 is doing globally, as well as in each of our bioregions, and talk about how we're looking to steward bioregional coherence. This is a graphic representation of how waves operate literally in the physical world. This isn't metaphorical. This is literally that waves, when they are in phase, so when they are aligned in harmony, they can literally exponentiate their impact. So it isn't just two waves together that it goes above the line, as you can see. And conversely, when waves are out of phase, it collapses their impact. So it zeroes it out, essentially. And so we just use this, somewhat metaphorical, but somewhat literal concept of to illustrate the value of coherence when you're building a movement. So now I'll just go and give a little bit of background about how R3.0 is doing that work on a global scale, and then again hone us into our own bioregion. So we're doing three things in general. We're doing bioregional convening, and that's open dialogues throughout the year, and then a conference, and then confluences, which are in-person bioregional gatherings in concert with our conference, and that's intended to start revitalize the practice of congressing. The other thing we're doing is we are advocating for two-eyed bioregional knowledge commoning or knowledge commons. And in particular, we are creating a bioregional knowledge commons community of inquiry and practice. And then finally, we're looking at bioregional self-governance, and we're particularly interested in this idea of co-governance that we discovered from the Alliance. So you'll hear more about that from them. So just a little bit about each of those before I pass it along. On the convening side of things, we're hosting these open dialogues on a monthly basis. And so Michelle and others, Mary Graham, who she mentioned, and Karen Kashyap, appeared on one of those last week. And so those are happening on a monthly basis, and those are addressing some of the issues that we'll be looking at in our 12th International Conference in September. Now, that conference is all online, but we are inviting bioregions to convene what we're calling confluences. And this is something where, alongside this online virtual conference, bioregions will be gathering in person to view that content, to do whatever kind of governance they need to do for themselves, and then to come together the day after the conference globally, so that we will have bioregions across the globe gathering to cross-pollinate. And then finally, all of this is looking to revitalize the practice that goes back to the mid-70s. The idea was seeded, and in 1980 was the first actual bioregional Congress that merges gathering and governance. And those continue to this day, and they reached a continental scale in the 80s through 2009. So we're looking to revitalize that practice. On the bioregional knowledge commons front, there's a couple of things we're doing. One is that we'll be presenting at the International Association for the Study of the Commons. They're regenerating the Commons Conference at the University of Massachusetts in June. And so we just got confirmation of a panel, and Brenda, you'll be glad to know that they did finally confirm that. And so that's one place that we'll be addressing this. But in a more ongoing way, we've just kicked off a community of inquiry and practice around bioregional knowledge commons, and we have a global group of folks collaborating in that. And so we're at the very early stages of looking at both the content that would be in a commons and the sort of philosophy behind it. But that philosophy is really that the knowledge has to be stewarded by the users of that knowledge. So there's a relationship between theory and practice for bioregional knowledge commons. Finally, to bring things closer in here, another map here, or a couple of them you'll see. So this is the One Earth version of bioregions, and there's some controversy around them because they're just looking at the ecological aspects. So these maps are just ecology based, and it shows sort of the area that we're based in here, the Northeast US coastal forests, or the Northeastern American mixed forests is how they call them. But you would really need to overlay that with other cultural ways of identifying our place. And one of them would be the Eastern Algonquin speaking cultural zone. And I'm borrowing that term from Zbigniew, who's the executive director of the Alliance. And so here are a couple of different views of that, one from Wikipedia on the left, and then one from the nativeland.ca mapping of indigenous lands that is a really great resource. So that's sort of a couple of ways that you could envision our area. And I want to end out here by just talking about the context in which I met Maggie and Mike and a few others from the Alliance, and at a gathering at the Foundation House in Greenwich, Connecticut, where those of us who had expressed interest in co-creating a bioregional financing facility, that's a concept that was coined by Samantha Power, who's in the middle of that picture with the white shirt on. And she was in our area. And so that catalyzed the idea of gathering together. And it really, in the wake of that, there was more work before that, but that was a real catalyzing event into creating a bioregioning collective. And so now what I say here is that we're ambling toward co-governance. So co-governance is a concept that I learned about from Maggie and Mike and Brenda and their colleagues in the Alliance. You can see Jelani and Rahim also there on the upper left, who are members of the Alliance. And the idea of co-governance is governance that shares co-leadership between indigenous and non-indigenous communities. And so that's what I'm most excited about in our bioregioning collective. There's a lot of other work that we're doing, but I wanted to just use that as a lead into getting even more granular and land-based with the what we'll hear from the Alliance. So that's it for me. I'll stop sharing and hand it back to you, Michelle.
Thank you so much, Bill, and thank you for the maps. Yes, I love to be able to see a little bit of a bird's eye view and then dig around in the dirt and see the creatures as well. So thank you so much for that overview. And sure, I should say that AELA is participating in the R3O International Gathering online, and we'll be inviting other folks around Australia to connect with that through confluences, but also some other activities to get folks talking to each other here in Australia ahead of the bigger international gathering. So now I'm really delighted. I think I'm handing over to Maggie, and Maggie, you're going to be sharing some insights and thoughts, but it will then open into a conversation. So absolutely over to you guys and girls to share with us. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. It's such a pleasure to be here. Truly an honor to be here with Mike and Brenda. And now we know Bill. We are... I think it might be, thank you very much, Bill, for the overview of bioregioning. It might be appropriate to say that we feel very deeply that co-governance is not a thing, it's a process. And so we don't claim to be experts at it. We haven't arrived anywhere. We are just on this journey together and loving the learning and facing challenges together and It's deepening our sense of coherence, right? Where we're getting our waves to flow together. Not always easy. We all have a lot to do, but also that sense of coherence for us seems to also indicate a kind of interrelatedness and a coevolution. So as we are learning more about our entire family, learning how to live among all of our relatives, this is something that is very important underpinning that we're learning how those of us who have been separated are learning how to reconnect in a kind of coherent coevolution. Mike, Brenda, want to say anything before we turn to the slides? Brenda, I noticed you went off mute.
Yeah, no, I was just getting prepared.
Okay.
But you know, I have to
Yeah,
say
go
this
ahead.
is it. Thanks, Maggie. It's great to share the space with you all. And it's been a pleasure, you know, kind of participating with Michelle, you know, and of course, Bill. But yeah, I mean, as Native people, as I'm not sure of the slides, Maggie, but I think for me, I think the biggest thing is our relationship. And I think that how we look at Mother Earth, as we call her, or Turtle Island. And I think that some people just don't, I should say non-natives don't have that relationship that we have with our animals and with our trees and, you know, just the landscape itself and the water. And I think that that's something that really needs to be taught. So it's really nice to have, you know, Indigenous voices at the table for these kind of discussions.
Maggie,
I
are
don't know if
you
you want to
on
bring
mute?
up the slides, Maggie.
Yeah.
Hope everyone can see that.
Yeah.
Okay. So this on the right will look familiar. It's the global map, eco region map that Bill just shared with you. And then on the left is a map of our watershed showing you where it is in what's now called Connecticut. That's a Pequot word. So I wonder if maybe Brenda or Mike could talk a little bit about where this is situated in Pequot territory.
Go ahead, Cuz.
Wiinakan ni Tompawak. That is a good evening, friends. On behalf of the people who made Cousin Brenda and I, we are happy to be with you this evening. This map basically shows the most important watershed in our ancestral territories. These days, it is the only one that connects to the land that we have remaining from the settlement of the Northeast. And so the Whitford Brook and the Mystic River connect us to the ocean still, although we've been pushed 5 miles inland from it for obvious reasons. And so this is where today we still swim and fish and drink water and try to save the things that have been disappearing and try to save the ways that have been impacted by climate change. And so when we introduce ourselves in our language, we say Natai, and when you hear people loosely translate it, they will tell people that they're saying, I am from. What they're actually saying in our language is, I belong to. And so one of the many sacred places in this watershed for all Pequot people, and Cousin Brenda's Pequot community and mine as well, is a place called Lantern Hill. And Lantern Hill is a place that for thousands of years our people have been going for reasons that are physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual. And so we want to protect the things that allow us to do what we've always done. And it's beautiful to connect with other people who are fighting for the same things. And so, although the vast majority of people in Indian country, as we call it, would not have a clue of what bioregioning is, once it is accurately explained to them, the typical response is, well, isn't that what we do and why anyway?
If you look at the top of near the top of your screen, you can see the tallest peak there is Lantern Hill.
And so we not only respect those connections that Cousin Brenda talked about, those relatives, living beings that are our relatives, not just human beings, but also our relationships to everything. Everything in life is relationship focused, and if we can live that way, despite the dominant culture that we're in here, we will live as successfully as the people that gave us life in the first place. And so that word that you see on the slide in our language, Natonkwasanonak, is how you say that word. And it means our relatives. It's actually a word that we use in ceremony. And we're not just referring to Pequot people. We're referring to all people. We're referring to all living beings as our relatives. And that's who we pray for every time we get together to do it our way.
I've often said that if everybody led the way that, the natives led, and, we wouldn't have the issues that we have today,
Could follow that maybe with a little story about how the Alliance for the Mystic River Watershed was conceived. I was sitting with a friend, Derek Strong, who is an Eastern Pequot tribal member, and we were thinking about how waterways are traditionally connectors and connecting through infinite relationships outward in all directions and bringing all beings together as the basis of life, and how powerful water is as a connector, and that colonial boundary making, colonial map making, often used waterways as dividers. And so in the Mystic River Watershed, the Mystic River waterways are dividers and boundary lands, borderlands. And unfortunately, that means that no one is really caring for them, because it's not really anyone's responsibility. One of the things that we were talking about was how with relationship comes responsibility, and what the colonial imprint on the maps, which made these waterways dividers, had excused them from the responsibility of caring for these waterways. So we began thinking, well, then we just need to change the way that we think about our waterway. And instead of looking at a map and seeing how it divides us, we could look at the map and see how it connects us. And so these 4 towns in the lower left corner of this slide, and the 2 tribal nations whose reservations are now at the headwaters of the watershed, are all connected by these waterways, and it's our responsibility to care for them together.
And so the Alliance for the Mystic River Watershed did something that frankly I had never heard about as a tribal elder, and that is decide to create a majority of their board seats for tribal representatives. And the reality is, for our people, being included is rare. What we have most often been in the course of American history is ignored. And so to be included and actually empowered to get people to try to see their connections, because they are connected, they just don't know it, they just don't think about it. To get people to embrace those connections is something that our people are naturally pretty good at. And so it's a bit of an outreach challenge for us and a team building challenge, because why shouldn't we line up with more people who are fighting for the same things we are?
And it's really a learning challenge and a story sharing opportunity. And we believe strongly that once you learn someone else's story, that it's hard not to feel some kind of caring or connection or relationship with them. Certainly, it's difficult to fear them. And so this is a place that has a violent recent history. And that violence continues to do harm to this day. So we seize every possible opportunity to bring people together who might otherwise not have a reason to come together. But the reason now is care for water and the water that connects us. And so you can see in these two images a little bit what the Alliance gatherings look like, where people are coming together. People of all ages are coming together to learn from each other and to hear each other's stories, to begin to imagine together and plan together, to scheme schemes and dream dreams together, and then see that those plans are enacted in a way that is coherent and true to principles of healthy ecosystems and bioregions.
I could just add, Maggie, one of the really important things about the Alliance is our relationship building. And that's what's made us so successful. Not only, building relationships with the two native tribes that are within the watershed, but even the outside of that. We're also led by a youth council, and which makes us really unique. And we're hoping that others will follow. We just happen to be the two Pequot tribes just happen to be within the Mystic River Watershed, but there's 5 tribes in the state of Connecticut. So there's other opportunity, and we're really hopeful that, and I think we've already started to see signs of people kind of mimicking the Alliance and building, their strength is in the relationships and the relationship building. And we're all together for a common goal. So that's one of the things that I just really wanted to highlight with the Alliance, is that it is very unique in the way that, we're building relationships, not with just the tribes, but and that's what's made us successful.
And that gives us a chance to make change in the territories that have been taken from us.
Right.
What Brenda just described.
Yeah.
Bill, the area that Bill Baue has been working so hard to protect for so long is the westernmost boundary of our ancestral territory. The Connecticut River was arguably the most important river to us, historically and culturally speaking, although it is the furthest from the lands that we live on today, the very little that we were able to hold on to. And so much of our economy in terms of trade between us and tribes to the north and the west occurred obviously through the Connecticut River Valley. And so this is an area that has social and cultural and economic importance to us still, as it has for thousands of years. And so for us, the Connecticut River, and then what we still call the Pequot River that today is called the Thames, and the Mystic River and the Pawcatuck River are the four watersheds that have sustained our people most for thousands of years. And so taking care of lands and waters that have taken care of you for that long isn't very complicated to grasp.
Right.
And is a core cultural value and concept that we've tried to build in at every level. So every level from elementary school, students who may be young members of our youth council, all the way through these planners convenings, which gives an opportunity for municipal government staff and commissions to be interacting with tribal staff around the issues of how do we care for these waterways that none of us owns. And yet there are still these boundaries, and how do we work across these boundaries to shift to think about not only how we can shift our human relationships, but also how we can shift everyone's relationship with land and water and all of the beings in our extended family here. And I noticed in the chat that we keep using the word watershed. We mean catchment, but we use watershed here. So we're going to continue to do that.
Please do. And a lot of Australians also use it, but predominantly in, I guess, official government policies, and many communities we use the word catchment. But it's all the same thing. Where the water flows when it rains, where the water runs when it's in a river. It's all beautiful. Thank you.
Yeah. And you can also see here that the Alliance is the Alliance doesn't have an office. It doesn't have a place. It's a moving, flowing organization that meets with the support of our allies. And one of our closest allies is the Mashantucket Pequot Museum and Research Center. And Mike is on the board of that. And they have been extraordinarily generous in providing us meeting space and staff and supporting the Youth Climate Summit, which we were supporting this year, organized by another one of our youth board members. And so they are very much involved from the co-governance standpoint and also from the learning standpoint, because a lot of us have a lot of learning or unforgetting or relearning or unlearning to do. And so without putting a tremendous and undeserved burden on our tribal partners, the museum helps to build a bridge between cultures and fosters cultural learning, which is their expertise. So we try to get as many people to go to the museum and to learn in the museum, and to be able to immerse themselves in the long history of this place, as well as understanding the more recent history, so that we can come to shift those relationships more permanently and more securely. MT, did you want to say anything about the museum and its role in the alliances?
I think from our perspective, first of all, it is a gift for any tribe to have the opportunity to tell and share its history in its own way. Usually around the world, it is other people controlling our sacred objects, and the remains of our ancestors, unfortunately, often are included in that mix. And so to have a museum of our own is a great gift, and to be able to not only use it to reinforce the relationships within our tribe, and there is plenty of use of the museum for not only Mashantucket Pequot, but also Eastern Pequot people to share space. We actually had a meeting there this morning as we planned for something that we call Pequot Days, where both of these Pequot communities come together for several days to support one another and celebrate our survival, given some of the things that our ancestors had to go through to give us life. And so the museum is a special place. Our museum board, I am one of the members of the museum board, and our actual name for that group, we call it a board to outsiders because it's easier for people to understand. Our actual name of that group in our language is Katia Tonquatan, which means our story, which tells you the purpose for our museum in a title. And so we're pretty straightforward and literal folks with our connections, and happy to share those and grow those, and also help us understand how to better navigate this dominant cultural world that often still prefers to ignore us. I mean, Maggie in this organization is an exception to the rule, but in the U.S., the rule still prevails most of the time, unfortunately. And so to work alongside people who want to change that is a joy for us.
I wonder if, Brenda, you would say a word or two about what it means to be an elder in passing culture on. We're honored to be in the presence of two elders today. Brenda and Mike both are tribal elders. Brenda, do you want to say a word about that?
Sure. You know, first, I'm humbled and honored to be an elder of my community. You know, it's something that I take very seriously. And I do believe as an elder, I have a relationship, a responsibility, you know, to my younger folk, and to mentor them, and, you know, because I won't be here forever. So I have been, you know, part of my government for over 30 years, which is a long time. I'm actually going into my 34th year. It's hard to believe. But I wouldn't change anything. I love my people. And you know, this has been my life's work, and this getting into this bioregional type field is new for me, but it's exciting as well, because there is such a need for it. But you know, being an elder is it's a huge responsibility. You know, you have a lot to pass down. You know, I stand on many shoulders of people that have come before me, you know, and they also felt, you know, it's one of these things of this oral tradition that we have, that we pass down from story, you know, from elders to, you know, from community members to community members, and especially as elders. It is a position that, you know, I feel I've earned after all my years of service. And in order to be an elder in our community, you only have to be 55. So I'm a young elder, even though I'm 58. But I have been, you know, part of this government for a very long time. And along with cousin Mike, you know, we are proud to represent our people as elders. But there is a responsibility that comes with that, and that is to teach others and to pass on traditions, oral traditions, culture, that kind of stuff. So although it's an honor, and we are as elders well respected in our communities. I'm respected well in Michael's community and vice versa. So it is a position of, I would say a position of stature, but you know, there is, like I said, a responsibility that goes along with that. One that I practice every day. I mentor folks. I even mentor some of Michael's community members that have asked for some help. And just, you know, because I've been doing this for so long, and I like to share. So I'm one that likes to pass on the knowledge and the culture and the traditions that we have, and things that I've been taught, because somebody took the time to do that for me. So it is a responsibility that I take on seriously. but that's pretty much the, the role of our elder amongst, a handful or 2 handfuls of other things that we do. But as far as the community, yeah, it's the major function is to pass that on oral traditions, like I said, and culture.
Thank
I
you.
think Brenda summarized it well, although some days I introduce myself as a tribal elder in denial.
Yeah, good one, cuz I'm gonna try that.
And so aside from her accurate summary, for me, that mentorship includes mentoring traditional singers. I've been a traditional singer since I was young and thin, and that was a really, really long time ago. And so now I mentor the singers in both Pequot communities and for the Narragansett tribe and a few others. And it's just a joy to see young people want to do what we've always done, is the way I would summarize it shortly. Oh, and by the way, Michelle, I also used to be, years ago, the Natural Resource Protection Director for our tribe. And so when our public works department in this tribal community has battles with the beavers, I root for the beavers.
Oh, I do hope so. Yes, but I know it's very complex. He's so clever. I'm still waiting for the beaver photo, but I'm being very patient. Good on you, Mike.
It's
Good on you,
coming
Mike.
in due time.
Mhm.
We are presently in Sequan Spring in the fish moon. So, Mike, would you say something about Sequanamasak?
Well, first of all, I guess it's important to know that now this time of year for us traditionally is New Year. And so for us, the spring is the first season of the year. As I say, most things about our culture are straightforward and logical if someone explains them to you. And so to start the year at a time of regeneration is the traditional way to do it. And part of the reason Sequanamas is so important to us, and there are many reasons, is that it was literally the sign of the start of a new year, the physical, natural sign that our new year was here. And so this is a fish that we've depended upon for lots and lots of things, from fish hooks themselves to fertilizer. This is by far the best traditional fertilizer we have ever used in our tribes. And then obviously food itself and the sustenance for other species that we nurture and depend upon. And so when Sequanamas is threatened, the entire chain of life in this region is threatened, and so are all of our cultural traditions that connect to it. You may be familiar with the visual of the 3 sisters, and there are stories and legends that go with that, but we always would grow corn and beans and squash together. Oh, you have a 3 sisters picture in there, Maggie. There. And so we would grow corn and squash and beans together for obvious reasons, so that they could complement and feed and strengthen one another while they were growing. At the bottom, and you can find colonial accounts of thousands of these mounds, because we would do each of them in a mound that they would see when they would come in on boats. In the bottom of every single one of those mounds was Sequanamas. And so we have sacred waters now that haven't seen Sequanamas in generations because of water quality, because of dams, because of overfishing, for many reasons. And so one of our major goals is to see Sequanamas return to Lantern Hill Pond, which is a sacred body of water for us at the foot of a sacred hill. And so we've been trying to raise awareness of the population crash recently in our region for Sequanimus and trying to help bring it back when and where we can, get everyone else to join in.
We aren't the only ones who love Sequanimus. So it's important to remember that this is we're a coastal region. And so we have this is an osprey or a fish hawk. And this is a type of hawk that pretty much only eats fish. And Sequanimus is the favorite fish of the osprey. So much so that they are symbiotically related. So the osprey migration is timed with the river herring or Sequanimus spawning. So as they start returning into the harbors and up the rivers, so do the osprey return in the spring. Another spring bird. I don't know if you have robins.
Depends on how you classify your robins. We have birds in Australia that look like robins, and we have birds that Westerners call robins, and we have birds that look like robins but are not robins. So, everything over here has its own origins, its own place, its own words. And then Westerners
Yes, of
named
course.
everything. They call a silky oak is actually a grevillea. Anyway, so beautiful bird, whatever it's called. And we have things called robins who are gorgeous, but I'm not sure if they're actually related to your robins. I'd have to triple check.
Yeah, I don't know, but another sign of spring.
Yes, we also find the culture to be a bit contrarian.
But I think I did see a beaver, Michelle, a beaver picture.
It's coming, but we're
It's coming.
establishing
It's
the coastal
coming.
relationships
We're
first.
working our
Yep.
way up to the beaver, I see.
Yeah, we are. So we're doing a little coevolution with oysters and other shellfish. So I don't know if. Oh yeah, we could dwell on this one. Mike, did you want to say a word about reconnecting the kids with
We
ancestral
actually,
waterways and oysters?
our museum has a summer camp that the Alliance for Mystic River Watershed helps us to plan and implement. And we're able to get dozens of young tribal people in direct contact with their resources. And so, for many of them, they've had their first visit to an oyster farm and the first opportunity to eat oysters the way we always have, which is while you're still standing knee deep in the water. And lots of wonderful canoe and kayak and boating journeys. And so, for a lot of our young people, especially from families that have only recently returned to us, it's great to get them to reconnect. Obviously, there's a long history that gives us an advantage. I tell folks we don't really do the work. The river and the natural relatives do the work. We just drag the kids out there and allow it to. And so
I have a picture of us paddling somewhere here. There we go.
Yes, that is one of the river journeys. That is the Mystic River, by the way, which became a seaport town, shipbuilding and whaling and all of the rest, if you go back a few centuries. And now is one of the #1 tourist areas in Connecticut, capitalizing upon all of that seafaring history and the architecture and whatnot that goes with it. And so historically speaking, the organizations that control real estate in Mystic have not treated us kindly, but thankfully over the past decade or so, that seems to be changing literally for the first time ever. And so we've been able
Actually,
to we've been able to deepen relationships with many organizations in Mystic that just weren't there before.
I was just going to say, Michael, in fact, Nikai and I have been asked to consult on a whaling exhibit that's going to be happening at Mystic Seaport. And that's another
beautiful.
thing that connected us to the water for centuries, is that in both of our communities, we were quite avid whalers and sealers, as I'm finding out. So that was another thing that really drew us to the water, was, the activities. And unfortunately, we had to move off the reservation, for those of our ancestors that were the whalers, because there was no employment or anything on the reservation. So they had to leave, just to be able to support families. So that was another connection to the water as far as the Pequots.
We have oral and documented history of our relatives leaving on whaling vessels from New London and having a beer together in Portugal, hopping off of different whaling ships. And so most of the whalers on most of the boats that left New London and New Bedford were in fact indigenous people from our tribes and sister communities. You almost never see that written about in American history, but a majority of the whalers in American history were Native people. How else would they have known what to find or where, if you just think about it logically?
Very true.
It would have been pretty random. So it's also likely that there's wampum around the world from here.
Oh, certainly.
Oh, yeah.
And this is a special item to us, and we have a tradition of wampum belts that tell stories that would actually replace the books in a library, so to speak, if you understand how to read them. And all of those tiny individual beads are made from the shell of this specific clam called a quahog. And this was really our trading advantage, historically speaking, because we were coastal people. And so all of the inland tribes, including all of the tribes that you might hear called Iroquois, although they don't like that term, those are our Haudenosaunee relatives in what is now upstate New York, have held on to the vast majority of their wampum traditions, and there are no quahogs anywhere close to our Haudenosaunee relatives in upstate New York. All of the wampum for all of those traditions came through trade with our people. And so 4,500 years is how long we say we have been making wampum belts. And so it's probably longer than that, frankly. But we still have traditional wampum makers in most of the tribal communities left in New England.
Things that we did in the camp last summer was to teach kids about beach erosion and how to measure it. So this is happening simultaneously while these two are learning some Western science and some basic surveying. This one is making his own wampum. So he found a little bit of quahog shell and he's polishing it up. Did you want to say anything about the drum, Mike?
I mean, I wouldn't be able to do it much service. We have many kinds of drums that represent the heartbeat of our people in terms of how we use them. What you actually see here is a feeding of drums. And so there are things that we have to do to maintain our traditional drums. The small one is a water drum. That is one of the oldest forms of drum for our people. And that tiny one has water in it and a different stick that we use and different songs that go with it. And that has been a traditional drum for our people for thousands of years. The bigger drum for about 500 years. that one came to New England native people as you would know them today because of a peace agreement between our Onondaga, was it Onondaga? No, a peace agreement between our Odawa and Wabanaki Confederacy relatives just before colonization, maybe 50 years, resulted in those Odawa folks giving our Wabanaki Confederacy relatives a big drum that wasn't traditional for us at the time. And the use of that big drum spread from the northern Algonquin speaking tribes in the Northeast to those of us in the southern part of the Northeast where our ancestral homelands are. And so, you know, we use this for ceremonies of all kinds. And so whether they're prayer ceremonies or something as community-based as a wedding or a funeral or a birthday party, we have our own traditional birthday songs. And so we sometimes use happy birthday along with them, or sometimes one instead of the other. But our people have a choice. That's a beautiful thing.
A good example of cultural bioregioning.
Mike, there's a question in the chat for you. What hide is used on that big drum? Oh, sorry, Michelle.
Oh, just you're trying to cut off Michelle's beavers, cousin.
I'm just having a beaver moment. You people keep talking. Just talk amongst yourselves.
That
Keep Michelle
particular
interested.
that particular drum is elk hide, but we use usually just deer hide. We also use on some of our drums just regular cowhide these days when we're making a drum that's used for certain purposes. This one is elk hide because of the things that it's used for.
They are so cute. Come
Moment
on,
of
tell us
appreciation.
tell us a beaver story. I know that they've been much maligned and are hugely important creatures, but I have to admit, I just love the way they walk when they're carrying the little babies or if they're carrying a pumpkin. But please tell us the importance of the beaver to the bioregion while I grin like a small child over here.
Well, the beaver is important for many reasons, and so mostly there are oral tradition lessons from the behavior of the beaver that that are shared with our people. But in addition, obviously, this was, if I talked about wampum being our most unique trade item, you know, the beaver itself kept our people alive in a lot more ways than one. And so obviously managing the water in the ways that it does creates opportunity for our people to feed themselves while the beaver is feeding its own. And so when you follow those kind of patterns and rhythms, you look at, everyone looked at a beaver the way Michelle looks at it today. And so there was much more value there than just a hide, which is what ultimately the capitalist system turned it into in terms of an equation. But for us, the intelligence was obvious. Frankly, the family relationships were obvious, although most people wouldn't think of beavers in that way. If that's the way you live every day, that's something you're going to see. And so those are some of the things that the oral stories, the oral tradition stories connect to. And then, of course, because elders are elders, they throw in some fantastical parts that leave you wondering whether they made that up or that part was true.
And again, I just want to just add that that's another reason why it's important that, you know, our relationships with our four-legged furry friends is so important too. You know, there's a lot of like cousin Mike said, is a lot of that oral history. And yes, Michelle, they come from beavers as well, you know, and deer and any other, you know, four-legged furry friends that are out here, you know. So we have a relationship with those, and there's a reason why we have these relationships.
Mm.
The
Absolutely.
lessons are so important, right? The gifts that we all bring, the importance of relationships
And what they
in
teach us,
our,
what they teach us is
yes,
important.
yeah,
Yes.
and that, you know, nature really is the best teacher.
Right. Just like you said about the, you know, the robin too. It's a sign of the springtime. See, we use that kind of stuff. We didn't always have a clock, you know. So these are the things that we used as Native people. We basically read the landscape. That's what we used. So
It's wonderful, and I hope one day we can perhaps bring some of the First Nations peoples from Australia into conversation with you and share the stories. Even just 2 weeks ago, when I was down in Penrith and listening to Durrag and folks from other different groups, the stories of the seasons and the attention paid to the running of certain fish. And when that fish was moving, that was the time when these flowers would pop out and these other things could be harvested. And I can listen to those stories as a non-Indigenous person forever, because that is the deep, deep understanding of place and season and movement and change and connection. And it's just
absolutely.
fantastic. Oh, and there's a
And
very sweet, sweet, wonderful product. Yum.
yes,
Yes.
we have for generations been making maple syrup in our tribal community, and so we still continue to make syrup today, although frankly, we have much better equipment. So in my view, today's children have it much easier than folks Brenda's age and mine did. When every tree had an individual tap and all of us had a metal bucket carrying it to the boiler. Anyway, without being
Yeah.
a complaining old elder, we still do what we've always done with maple syrup, and so that is a beautiful thing. But because y'all are from Australia, I have to tell the story of a woman who created a relationship with the Pequot tribe, an Australian Aboriginal woman who is no longer with us, but her name was Letty Scott. And Letty Scott, to make a really long story a little bit shorter, was convinced that her husband had been murdered in police custody, although she was told that he committed suicide. She scraped up enough help to go to New York and literally flew to New York, not knowing anyone in the States at all, and told someone at John F. Kennedy Airport she was there to seek the help of Indigenous people in America. And those people at JFK Airport sent her to our relatives on Long Island, and their tribe is called Shinnecock. She spent about a month in that community with the Shinnecock people, and she was asking for help the whole way through. And someone at Shinnecock told her, if there's anyone that can and might help you, it would be the Pequots. And so she was put on a ferry by our Shinnecock relatives and showed up in front of me and the rest of the tribal council at the time. To make the story shorter than it actually is, we were able to prove by putting together a remarkable team of people led by Henry Lee, who is a friend of our tribe and one of the world's best forensic pathologists. We were able to prove that Douglas Scott was, in fact, murdered, not dying from suicide. And Henry Lee went all the way to Australia to deliver the results of the scientific analysis, and there was no change in the conclusion about the death of Douglas Scott. But we tried, and it ended up forming a relationship between our Pequot people and the Scott family. And so anyway, being on with you makes me wonder how Letty Scott's son might be doing now. He came with her and spent a few months in our tribal community after spending a few months in the Shinnecock tribal community on Long Island.
That is an amazing story. I'm so sad that the end result is so incredibly predictable in the Australian context. And it's a topic for another day, but Aboriginal deaths in custody is a horrific ongoing problem in the institutionalized crime system in Australia, which I know that through your work and culture and experiences, you understand only too well the things that continue to occur in the modern day. So, but thank you for caring for those people and supporting them. I'm going to look them up and see if I can find them. Thank you for
In our
sharing.
community, in our community
That'd be great.
center, in our community center, as soon as you walk in, you see pictures on the wall, and you're certainly probably more familiar than people in my community with the traditional artwork with all of the dots that make different things depending on what angle you're looking at the painting from, and it's just beautiful stuff. But we have still two of those Aboriginal created artworks in our own community center that literally everybody walks by when they walk in.
That is a beautiful connection to our place over here and to those people.
Yeah.
So, yeah. We've got about 10, 11 minutes for some questions, and there's two have come in from participants, which is lovely. And I have a couple too. So let's see how we go for time. Jennifer has asked a really great question, I think. Do you have morning traditions? So not early morning, getting up in the morning, but sadness traditions, mourning. Do you have morning traditions for everyday life? Not only the passing of treasured beings, but the sorrows we carry amidst our daily living? It's a great question.
We do, and that question actually connects to the little piece that I shared earlier about our prayer ceremonies. We have what we call sweat lodge ceremonies that are similar to Indigenous people in other places, but sometimes called different things. And so that word, Natonkwasanonak, that I mentioned to you earlier, is the word that we say when we enter a sweat lodge ceremony, and every person that enters says that word, and every person that leaves when the ceremony is over after several rounds says the same word on the way out. And so bringing people together, not just the people from our tribal community, and literally wishing for the wellness of all people and beings is one of the ways that we ceremonially do what you're talking about. And we also have burial traditions that attach to ceremonial fires. And so we build a fire in a certain way, and we leave a certain piece of the fire circle uncompleted until we actually commit the person to the earth. And we have songs of multiple types that are sung from the time that person's fire is lit, which is as soon as they pass, until we return them to the earth. And so different songs that are required at different times. A traveling song is one of those songs that everybody gets. Every single one of our relatives during their fire gets 4 songs. And so they get a flag song, which is basically our version of a national anthem. And they get a victory song, which is a song that honors all of our warriors. And they get a memorial song, which honors their life. And they get an honoring song that honors their entire family. There's more, but that's the piece I could give you quickly.
Couldn't have said it better myself, Gus.
Yeah, and Brenda, did you have anything you wanted to add to that?
I was just gonna say, I mean, he pretty much summed it up. We do keep the fire going for 3 days, while we mourn. And like Mike said, there's certain traditions and songs that are appropriate for mourning.
And the fire actually represents the person who has passed during that ceremonial period. And so people are supposed to, the same people that would gather around the person in life are supposed to gather around the fire and tell stories about that person. And so in our traveling song, some of the words in our language actually say, travel safely, we will tell your stories. And that starts immediately at the fire.
Yeah.
Beautiful. And can I ask, just the second part of this question is about the sorrows of daily life, or perhaps collective loss. I wonder if you have any, not to dwell on the sad stuff, I have heaps of questions about the good stuff too, or the positive, happy things. But in terms of the colonization of your lands, the destruction that you see around you today, how does your community cope with that? And has it created, or did it already have processes for mourning that kind of loss, the loss of species or other things? Or is that something you'd prefer not to talk about too? I mean, it's a pretty intense focus.
No, if you live the life that is connected to place, your healing is built in. And so, you know, this Lantern Hill sacred place that I've mentioned a few times, I spend an hour or two there 3 or 4 times a week. And it is literally a healing place for us. In fact, the waters are healing waters. These days, science would tell you the high levels of suspended silica in the water help your regenerative tissue to bounce back more quickly. Well, my ancestors and Brenda's knew that was healing water, although they didn't know anything about suspended silica.
Yeah.
And so we have places that we go, the same places that the people who made us went for dealing with those issues. And it's part of the reason that the place-based culture is something that comes with healing inherently.
Wonderful, thank you. We've got a couple of questions about some of the more organizational aspects of your work, which I might group all together in just a moment. In terms of the place-based and spiritual connections that folks have, I would just love your opinions, perhaps all of you, on the bioregional word is very much an English word from a Western construct. Do you feel in your work that it is a useful bridging word and concept across different cultures, or do you have other words that you prefer to use? Because here in Australia, you know, we have one of the oldest continuous cultures on Earth, 60,000 years plus of continuous occupation and cultural development, and it's just wondrous. And I often, as a non-Indigenous person, feel sort of somewhat uncomfortable with the word bioregional. It seems such a small piecemeal sort of word for the depth of people's connection, but it is a very helpful word for the work that we often engage in. Can I ask your opinion on that? Are there other words you use, or is it an okay word, does the job?
There are other words that we use, but I'm not offended by the word. I'm just committed to translating it into our worldview and values for my relatives that come from sister communities. Because at the end of the day, if you believe in Natokwasanonok, that we are all relatives, you want to speak in a way that reaches most of the relatives that you need to march with you toward a particular goal.
Right.
And so from my perspective, it's a reverse of what the usual is. We need to increase our cultural intelligence when it comes to this terminology so that we can appreciate other cultures the same way we would like to be appreciated.
That's beautiful.
And
Yeah.
I can
Yeah,
share.
Bill, please.
Yeah, so I've been in conversation with Sarah Queblatin from the Philippines, who was just recently in Mexico, where they've been hosting a gathering of indigenous peoples who are engaging and who are embracing the bioregional framing. And so Chief Phil Lane has been spearheading this for a number of years now. And so that is an ongoing sort of interconnection between the indigenous communities and the bioregional movement. So I'll put a link to an essay that he recently wrote about that. And I think that's also, you know, underpinning some of our work at R3.0. Actually, when I talked about the two-eyed seeing, I've heard back from folks, including Mike, was saying like, well, two eyes isn't that actually a little limited? Shouldn't we really be talking about it in terms of relational instead of just two-eyed? But the name two-eyed seeing is talking about indigenous and non-indigenous, and I think the spirit here is that there's even more diversity than just limiting it down to that. So I'll share that link in the sidebar.
No, please do. It's a wonderful, wherever folks can come together and talk about their place-based and their bioregional. In Australia, I'm sure you know that there's an English word that is often used by Indigenous and non-Indigenous people, which it's called country, caring for country or caring with country. And it's not country in terms of a nation state. It's a conflated concept that means the land as a moral entity, the spirit of the land, our relationship with the land, all the beings with it. So if you hear people in Australia saying caring for country or anything about country, it's not nationalistic, it's not nation state, it's the map of places that I shared before. And again, non-Indigenous person can't speak to the depth of that concept, but it's a beautiful concept. So I'm just going to get on with one or two more questions because I'm aware we're running out of time and everyone is obviously quite busy, but we could probably have this discussion for 2 days and not get to all of the things we'd love to chat about. I'm already conspiring in my mind to think about how we can all have more and bigger conversations between your group and folks here in Australia and beyond. Things that I'd love to hear more about, and you may not have time today, but certainly the work that we do inside AELA, I'd be very interested to know more about how you organise your youth council and the camps. I think that is just such a beautiful way of working. And Indigenous groups here in Australia always have, women's groups, men's groups, and youth groups and elders groups, finding ways to help people. But honestly, seeing a photo of a young person holding an oyster is pretty groovy. They might bond with other furry animals, but to get connected to the little filter dudes who keep our waters clean, that's a beautiful thing. So I'd love to know more about that. Someone asked about your funding, and is it government funding? I have an additional question, which would be, given you have arisen as a movement and a group of people in grassroots places with great love of place, how is your relationship with government entities? Do you engage with them? Are they interested in you? Do they prioritise what you have to say? Do they ignore you? Certainly in Australia, civil society groups often march on without government involvement because often it's too hard, and others, work closely. What are your relationships with government? And then maybe if we have time, we can talk about youth, but then we'll have to go.
Well, each tribe has a government to government relationship of its own with the United States, and that's part of what pre-existing sovereignty produces for us. And so those sometimes produce different outcomes, but we have some small levels of support from the state, or what in other parts of the world might be called a provincial government, and we have a federal trust responsibility on behalf of the United States federal government that gives us access to limited federal support, is what I would call it. I mean, it's frankly a nice thing to have access to, but hardly ever enough to meet the true needs, is the way I would describe the levels of funding available. But for tribes in general, that is true. And also nonprofit organizations in the U.S. that are tribal community focused in their service delivery actually qualify for increased access to federal funds from the U.S. government as well.
Thank you. And just quickly, in terms of your bioregional group, yes, Maggie, the group itself, the Watershed Alliance, how are you sort of structured or achieved? Because I had other questions which we don't have time for about the plans you're developing, the ideas you have, and then obviously actioning that means interacting with government stakeholders and others. But what
Exactly.
What is
So yeah, we are embarked on a 2 to 3 year project to create a comprehensive care plan for this
Excellent.
entire watershed, and the youth design circles, the community conversations and design circles are all contributing to this from the grassroots level. But at the same time, we are bringing in the resources, providing the opportunities for the leadership, the municipal leadership, to understand differently how relationships in a regional and even bioregional perspective, looking at things through that lens, could result in far more opportunities. And so they're beginning to see that, but it's an education project. So we we like to say that resilient communities are those that learn together, plan together, and act together. That's just shorthand for it's all about the relationships. And so we want to have good relationships at every level that are seeking opportunities to regenerate life. And so our funding is at the moment too much federal, so that we are actually getting punched around right now. We're getting bulldozed. And so, we are focusing on what holds us together and continuing to embrace a larger and larger cohort. And think about, I had a very technical slide at the end, and I'm like, yeah, no, we've seen the beavers. So, let's
You can't come
We've
back
hit
from
the
that.
mountain.
with all this
We've already
technical
reached the
stuff.
mountaintop, Maggie.
Yeah. But we are all really starting to think about what happens when we are working intertribally in this entire bioregion, when we are bridging the way the Alliance does, so that all of us are in this together with all of our relations. What I proposed today to the Long Island Sound Study Community Action Team is that they consider working with the Intertribal Alliance to put together a large conference, or confluence, as Bill might call it, where we do what I might call zero-based thinking, where we start without, what if there was no money coming in from anywhere and it's just us?
Yeah.
How has Mother Earth prepared us? How is our love empowering? How can we move together through this, instead of what's likely to happen because of the separation illness that is affecting us? What's possible that could happen is a further fragmentation and a kind of desperate seeking of funds from the same few sources. And so fortunately, also the biofinance movement is giving us a kind of a structure for thinking about how we can work together with intertribal leadership and also the existing nonprofit structures coming together, bridging that, so that we can innovate about how we can shift the purpose of capital to make sure that we are investing in local regenerative economies and laws that support the rights of nature and the rights of all of our relations to life. And so I don't know if that was specific enough. I could show you.
It's wonderful.
I'll send you the slides so you'll have the technical one too.
Yeah.
And as Bill may know, here in AELA, about 8 years ago, when I was designing our Greenprints project, it was really, how do we actually understand in a non-Indigenous concept the separation we've experienced, and the fact that our economic systems are just made up in our heads, and then we ramp that over the top of living systems. So Greenprints is about the transition by design, by understanding ecological foundations, and then understanding and rethinking economic and human activities, but all embedded and nestled in that relationship building. I think one day we should have a workshop where we're all just sitting here sharing ideas across who's doing what and what techniques, what maps you use, what mapping tools. I think there'd be so much to share and learn.
What do we mean by regeneration?
That's a whole nother topic. And what are your baselines? This is something Bill heard me nag in the wet session last. Like, what are you doing? Where are you going? What are you actually restoring to? A lot of non-Indigenous communities seem to be continuing to work in abstract. We're going to make this business use less water. It's like, okay, but how do you join up all the businesses in this place? And that's why I love bioregioning, or whatever word you want to use, place-based, where you put your arms around a place, it's connected, but just for a moment in time, you say, what does this place need to be ecologically healthy? How do we have to change human activities in this place to respect what we have and what we want to do to live here forever? So on that note, I'm going to stop talking. I'm going to say a huge thank you to all of you. This has been a wonderful session, a wonderful discussion. And
Yes.
I really hope it's the beginning of a longer term relationship across the oceans and across the ether where we can share knowledge and continue to chat. We'd love to stay in touch with you and all of your furry, feathery, scaly, skin-covered friends, especially beavers, but much, much more. I don't have time to get a final word from all of you. I'm very aware that we've kept you for so long, but I'd love for you to just have a chance to say goodbye. But a huge thank you from me and everybody here over in Australia and around other places.
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you all.
Thank you
Yes,
so
Thank
much.
I look
Thank
forward
you.
to any future endeavors and future conversations. We got to keep it going.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Learning and sharing and admiring each other's furry creatures. Thank you so much,
Yes.
everybody. And we
Thank
will see you
you.
all for the wonderful confluences and things that Bill's organising in September. I'm part of that, and I'm going to try and rustle up a few place-based and bioregional groups in Australia to somehow connect and do good things. So thank you so much for your time. Thank you, everyone
Fantastic.
in the audience. We hope to see you
Wonderful.
again soon. Thank you.
Take care.
Thank
Be well.
you.
Okay.
Goodbye,
Bye-bye.
everyone.
Thank you,
Have a good
everybody.
day.